All right, welcome back. We are now moving on to Scrum and complexity. So what Todd has set up for all of us to walk through here is a look at the Connectin framework by Dave Snowden. We're going to take some work examples, put them in some quadrants once Todd walks us through these quadrants, and see how different types of work actually could need a different type of approach. So that's going to be a big part of the conversation, and then how this all fits into the Scrum framework and some wrap up towards the end. So Todd, take it away. What's up with this quadrant setup? And can you tell us about Connectin?
Yeah, so this is the way that we really like to talk about and explain complexity. And this gentleman by the name of David Snowden created this management decision-making framework based off of the fact that there were 5 different domains of work, right? Obvious, where outputs are defined, it's very repeatable, inputs are explicit. Think repeatable, think build a widget, very repeatable work. Complicated, which is repeatable, but the inputs might not always be easy to find or explicit, right? The outcomes and outputs are still pretty certain, but we need experts every step of the way, kind of baby stepping this thing through. That's complicated. Complex, where we may not even know what the inputs are. Outputs are very unrepeatable, right? We don't know what we don't know. We're working in the complex domain. And chaos, where you're trained and triage for action, right? This last domain, we'll talk about this towards the end. This is disorder. One thing I'll say out of the gate is that experts can work in all of these. We don't want to limit and say there aren't experts in every domain, right? But in complicated, the reason why we say experts there is because you need them every single step of the way to make sure an outcome is certain. So you could have them in complex, these experts, but you don't know what you don't know. How'd I do so far, Ryan?
I like it. And so when I see this obvious domain where outputs are defined and repeatable, I see this work type here, Todd, that I want to move it. I want to take this, actually, maybe not that one. I'm going to put together IKEA furniture, right? Mm-hmm. Now, IKEA furniture is interesting in that the instructions are now cartoons. There's not even words on the instructions as far as I know. There's a picture on the front of the box of what you're building. All the materials are there. So the inputs are known, the expected output is known, the instructions on how to get there are repeatable. I always end up with extra parts, but I don't think that's my fault. I think that's the way they package it. But the outputs are defined and it's repeatable. You're never at risk of buying a coffee table and ending up with a couch, right?
Yeah, you know, Ryan, I think I will grab this fulfill an Amazon order and I'll toss it in there. Because I do think, now we could dig deeper into all the logistical things that happen when you fulfill an Amazon order. But right. For me, from a customer's perspective, I go on Amazon and I order a thing that I'd like and it's delivered to me, right? The input is very explicit. The output is something is shipped and received by me. And hopefully the outcome, depending on the product, is something that I'm satisfied with.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I think those are 2 really good, obvious ones. I'm going to put one more up there, Todd. I'm going to put, how about credit card payment processing?
Yeah, that's a good one.
So credit card payment processing, right? So you swipe the card, things happen over a network. Now, if you knew what those things were, it would terrify you, but it's all good stuff. Your money is safe. But it's a very straightforward thing. The transaction has an endpoint. That endpoint has a decision, accept or decline. Hopefully or approve or decline. Hopefully it's approved. It comes back. You make your purchase. You get your receipt. You go home. Very straightforward. Very standard steps and procedures and repeatable. Right? Credit card transactions happen millions of times an hour, billions of times a day, and they all seem to work out. And unless you're like me in my 20s and you get too many declines, but otherwise, very repeatable practice.
Yeah, and I think that'll take us moving on to complicated, right? And I think what I'm going to do with complicated, Ryan, just for the sake of getting this moving for us, is I'm going to move all of these over into here. The ones that I believe will be in complicated. Maybe you can argue me out of these. Maybe not.
No, I think you're right. When I see fixing a car or repairing appliances, building a house, or even end-of-year business tax filings, what I hear or what I visualize in all 4 of these, Todd, is an expert involved.
Absolutely.
Right?
There has to be.
For business tax filings, you and I have hired a great CPA to help us with Agile for Humans to keep us out of tax trouble. When you need a car fixed, you go to a mechanic. Appliance repair people, right? We had a dishwasher issue a few weeks ago. A repair person who's certified to handle that came in and took care of it. Building a house, like a lot of different disciplines. Carpenters are experts in their field, and plumbers and electricians. There's an expertise required in order to actually get the outcome that we're after here.
Yeah, and the outcome's pretty guaranteed here. I mean, you enlist those experts to make sure that it's guaranteed. But if we start to look at some other complex domains of work, right? I'm going to move these into complex. And I really think that when you're looking at something like building a successful political campaign, sure, you could classify it chaos. Sometimes it could turn into chaos. I can tell you people that build political campaigns don't want them to get to chaos. More is unknown than known. So you're constantly taking an empirical approach. You're taking an approach where you're inspecting, you're adapting and making it transparent, right? The same could be said for a stand-up comedy routine, writing a fiction book, or software development, right? We don't know what we don't know. Now, you might have experts in all of these, but they are using empirical data and an empirical approach to continue to build the product. For a stand-up comedian, they get some good results, right? What they get back right away is whether you laugh or not, right? And then they can build upon that example. And so one sticky note I'm going to add in here that we're not quite prepared for, but I'm putting it anyway. Scrum was purposely built for the complex domain. So when we talk about Scrum, we're talking about complex adaptive problems that we're trying to deal with. Writing software, a fiction book, stand-up comedy, all of these fall into complex domain where more is unknown than known.
Yeah, and then to wrap up the conversation on these quadrants, or at least to keep it moving along, battlefield triage, extinguishing a house fire, responding to a natural disaster. These are all things that that require triaging. These are things where it's really more action oriented. We're going to do something, see what happens, and then continue to respond until we can get the situation out of chaos and into a complex, complicated, or obvious domain.
Yeah.
Now, the thing I want to point out here, Todd, about disorder, I know you're going to define this for us. Disorder in and of itself, what it represents to me is that work can shift into any of these quadrants at any time due to disorder. We're not guaranteed a linear path. We're not guaranteed to be in the same quadrant that we always are, which is why Scrum was designed to solve complex adaptive problems. The word adaptive, the problem shifts and changes. It doesn't hold still just because we've decided to solve it. And so watching out for those moments when disorder strikes and what we thought was a obvious problem or situation suddenly becomes chaotic, we need to understand how to inspect, adapt, and respond in an appropriate way.
Yeah, and disorder to me is when you're operating and say software development, because we see it happen here a lot. When you're falsely operating in the complicated domain, meaning maybe you've explicitly defined all of the inputs up front and said this is the exact outcome that you're expecting, and it doesn't go the way that you planned. But you're operating here when you should have been operating on complex, just sitting in order. And mostly what happens is a cliff builds and you end up in chaos. So let's take that complex adaptive approach. Let's leverage something like the Scrum Framework, and let's get there.
I like it. So for this video, what we want you to do, we want you to consider, here's your homework, consider which domain or domains your work would go in, right? So perhaps rebuild this grid on a wall or in Mural or Miro, figure out which domains your work would go in, make that explicit, make that visible. And then how could the placement of your work potentially change the way that you approach your work? As Todd was saying, are you seeing software development as complicated? Is that leading you over the cliff to chaos? Could that shift your thinking in the way you approach the work? Let us know in the comments. That's the reason why the community is here. We want to know how that placement could change the way you approach your work. Can't wait to see your answers, and we'll see you in the next video.
Bye, everybody.